apologise in advance, I've got 29 slides, so I won't spend too long on each slide. But it's great to be here, thanks for having me. My name's Harriet, Fletcher-Gillhuys. In my current role, I work for Fashion Roundtable as a textiles researcher and lead on the project The Great British War Revival, which I will go into after my introduction into how it all started, my experience when I was studying, both at Nottingham Trent and at the Royal College where I did my Masters. Before I studied, I used to work in the wellness industry, spa and wellness industry, and I lived in the Caribbean for 2.5 years. Then I worked in New York for a while. Then I went into fashion, and I realised how devastating... Oh, it stopped, I think. Oh, is it still working? Is that better? Yeah. Then I went into fashion and I realised how criminal some of the industry can be, and I tried to combine my worlds, working in wellness, growing up in Shropshire, surrounded by sheep and farmers, and my love of British wool and my interest in fashion. And that's how I kind of started what I describe as my mission when I started my degree. So here is a picture of some of the work that I created when I first started. So when I started at Nottingham, I came across the fibre shed movement in my second year, which, as a lot of you, I'm sure of you know, that they kind of map the kind of supply chain from field through to final product within a 150-mile radius. Part of my degree was a chance to do a year in industry, so I did that year with fibre shed, and I made the decision to go and work at Fernhill Farm in Somerset. Then I worked for Rhea Burns Knitwear, and I worked for Herdwear when they were in the early days and they were just starting. I'm sure, as you know now, Herd's done very well. It's got a lot of exposure. She's working with natural dyes and blue-faced Leicesters. And I essentially started from the ground up. So I started shearing sheep, spinning the wool on a spinning wheel, and then making it into yarn, knittable yarn that I could create garments out of. When I first started at Fernhill, I was like, oh, it would be great to just maybe be able to knit a small swatch from the yarn that I've made from my spinning wheel. In the end, gave myself a massive mission, 100% biodegradable collection, fully fashioned, all naturally dyed myself. I launched a natural dye garden at Nottingham Trent. It was the first dye garden that they've ever had, and I was one of the people that first established that project. So I started harvesting the dyes in my second year, and I wanted to be able to trace the full supply chain from all of the products that I made right the way through to be able to tell that full story. A lot of my tutors at Nottingham, they were fantastic, but they were like, Harriet, you've given yourself way too much of a project. Like, it's not going to happen. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the first one to do it. And that's what I decided to do, basically. So I worked with the flock at Fernhill Farm, which was the Romney Shetland, so it's one single flock, and some of the blue-faced Leicesters, so these were my neighbours' sheep in Shropshire, and I would go and see them and I would collect their fleece, and then I purchased a spinning wheel, and I spent on average 6 to 8 months, 5 to 6 hours a day spinning a fleece on my spinning wheel by hand carding it to create these balls of yarn. So I've got some here, and a lot of them, one of my jumpers is on display down there as well, which you can see afterwards. But when I first started, it was really hard because it's really slubby, and I don't know if any of you have hand spun, but it takes a long time. So in the early days, it was just very chunky, slubby yarn that I was making, and then the more I practiced, the better I got at it. So that was one of the ones that I've spent a lot longer kind of practicing. So that was my mission, 100% biodegradable undergraduate collection. I also got really annoyed because everyone's always talking about sustainability learning outcomes, and it's like, how are you going to hit these learning outcomes if you're not actually teaching us how to work with local wool or natural dyes or actually talk about the full process? Essentially, it is just greenwashing at this point. So I always stand up to my tutors and the people at my university and say, I don't agree with what you're doing in the nicest of ways. I don't agree with it. So I'm just going to do what I want to do. And that's what I did. So this was my mood board for my final collection. So you can see that's me there shearing a sheep with Andy at Fernhill Farm. It was blade shearing. So it took me quite a long time, but I collected the fleece and then spun it on the spinning wheel. And you can see here some of the pieces that I then made. So you spin one bobbin, and then you need 2 bobbins to ply it together. And then I would wash it by hand and then dry them in my garden, and then roll them into balls by hand to then hand knit. And I filled my basket full of these different types of yarn to make a collection. On top of that, I was also looking at natural dyes, because if I was going to be using regional wool, I also wanted to use natural dyes. So I harvested some of the plants from the garden at NTU and also grew some plants in my own garden in Shropshire, and then collected these for dye stuff to be used in my final collection. So again, this was my colour board from my final collection, which was called From Field to Fibre, an Exploration into British Wool. One of the biggest challenges, I think, being a design student was looking at things like colour and placement, especially when working with natural dyes, because I felt a lot of limitations and I was very stuck in my mind between wanting to do what I ethically felt was right, but at the same time wanting to be creative. And I think a lot of students will come across this, especially as they're kind of taking on this movement and looking at working with regional wools and natural dyes. It's how do you not lose that kind of design and enthusiasm as being a student, but also doing what you feel is the right way of working. So I just wanted to show you some of the pictures really from my design portfolio, because you can see how I was really trying to play around with colour placement, but ultimately I was just working with the natural colours of the sheep. And that was brilliant when you're knitting a swatch and it's really close up, but when you're looking at it on a catwalk and you're thinking about what that's going to be like if it goes to like Graduate Fashion Week and they're essentially going to be seeing that for 2 minutes and then it's going to be off. How do you tell that story? And that's what I found the most challenging out of all of it, was how do I align my work with the current fashion system and also show all of the work and time that it's taken me. You know, like I was fully fashioning every single piece. So I was calculating shaping, I was doing that on my dubier, I was doing it by hand, I was doing it on the domestic. Power knit was quite challenging because at Nottingham they didn't want us putting British wool through the power knit machine, so we had Shima and we had Stoll. And then we had 60 dubiers and a lot of domestic. So it's a very technical university. It was brilliant in terms of teaching, but there was a lot of hesitation around working with British wool on the machines. So I had to do a lot of it myself and just kind of went, I'm not really going to use power knit. I used it a little bit, but ultimately it was me just working on my domestic and then trying to get some of it through the dubier as well. And then you can see this was the development for like outfit 2. So again, kind of colour placement, how I was playing around with how it was going to look on the body, lots of different techniques and patterns that I was trying to incorporate, because again, I was very limited on machine gauges. So I was working with kind of 5 and 7 gauge dubier machines, and then domestic is about the equivalent of a 5 gauge as well. So I was limited in terms of gauge with what I could do, and then with my hand knits, but I also wanted it to look like I was playing around with pattern and placement to make the collection interesting, because again I didn't want to just make an ethical collection that was really dry and uninteresting to look at, because then what's the point in me creating it? So I was really trying to like hit the kind of the middle ground with that. And then again, that's just a picture as it was starting to develop and as it was being modelled. And I sent my basket of yarn down the catwalk as well. So this was my grandmother's basket of yarn, and she was a hand knitter. So I wanted to bring that in as well. And really, I guess, make them almost look like sheep when they were going down the catwalk. And then that was the final lineup that I'd hand drawn. But again, I'm very critical because I don't feel there's enough colour in there. But I was harvesting all of the colours myself, so there was only so much that I could do in terms of colour placement as well. And that's me, well, yeah, just when they'd just been down the catwalk, so that was the final looks in the end. And then I went to the Royal College of Art to do my master's, so I was really fortunate I got a full scholarship to go to the Royal College. They approached me and wanted me to do my master's there from my undergraduate collection. And so when I started at the RCA, I had all of this knowledge from the collection that I'd made, but I was like, well, what can I do now? I've already done it. I've done the 100% biodegradable thing. I've done the natural dyes. What does fashion even mean? Do I even want to work in fashion? I was having all of these conversations with myself. So then I said, okay, I'm going to make one jumper in 1 year. And I'm going to talk about everything that I've done. I'm going to continue with my spinning. I'm going to continue with my natural dyeing. I then established a second dye garden at the Royal College of Art because I didn't have one at the time. And I was like, we need to be having these conversations with students. So then I was questioning, well, what's this word, regenerative? Like everyone's saying regenerative fashion. They just throw this buzzword around, but no one really understands what it actually means. So I was like, I'm going to try and kind of work this out myself. So essentially it became the 1,312-hour jumper when I calculated how much time it took for shearing, carding, spinning and washing, harvesting and dyeing, and then hand knitting. So the hand knitting was also sampling as well. So I would sample it in hand knit, then I would unravel it, then I would reknit it again because I was working with just the yarns that I had and that was it. And it was really questioning kind of regenerative practices, principles and frameworks. And then I was looking at a lot of the fibre shed work. They just released this farming fashion calendar yearly cycle, and I worked with that as well to kind of construct and design my jumper for my master's project. And then I also worked a lot with mapping, so then I was looking at my work when I was at Nottingham, how I'd established the dye garden there, how I'd worked for Herd, and I was working with farmers up in Lancashire, and then how was part of Fibre Shed in Bristol, Fernhill Farm, and then moving to London and starting at the RCA. So it was called From Soil to Sheep to You, because it was my whole transition through my studies and then how I'd got to the end point of making my jumper for my master's. And then there's just some more images from my portfolio, from my MA, and how I worked with this kind of system. So I worked with the farming year and kind of tracked everything that I did across the entire year, including harvesting the dyes. And then the jumper has numbers on it, so it links back to this kind of circle that I'd created. And then that was the final show at the RCA, which was at RCA Battersea. I hadn't put the garment together at that point. I still had it in pieces. And the reason why I had it in pieces was because I didn't want people to just see it as a jumper. I wanted them to see it as a process. And I wanted them to see how garments kind of sit between that kind of element, between being something that's telling a story, that's telling you a process of kind of the slow construction, and how it then becomes this kind of ornament for the body rather than just becoming fashion. But then after the show, I then put it together. But yeah, the RCA just wanted us to have an exhibition space rather than having a catwalk. And that was just the one jumper in black and white, because I was just very adamant it was just going to be one piece and that was it. And that's all it needed to be to tell my story. So when I was at the RCA, I started working for Fashion Roundtable. So I was doing that as a part-time basis while I was also managing the Masters. And I started as a lead researcher on the project, The Great British War Revival, in collaboration with the King's Foundation's Modern Artisan programme. And we've now got John Smedley as a brand partner, which is fantastic. So the Great British War Revival essentially maps out the system from farmer to designer in the UK. And the reason why I felt so passionate about this was because I noticed a lot of the problems that I was facing when I was studying as a student. And I thought, I don't want anybody else to go through the things that I was going through. So I thought, okay, well, what are the barriers to entry? A lot of the barriers to entry are terminology, people understanding how to speak to farmers, how they source their wool, what they can do with it. In terms of natural dyes, like, is it colour fast? Is it light fast? How does it work in terms of commerciality? So I put this together with Meg and the Wool Library, Zoe and Maria. And we launched the Great British War Revival. So I'll just talk through this. I won't spend too long on each slide, but a little bit about the project. So again, yeah, I've just spoken about this already, but it's with the Modern Artisan programme, and they worked with the Dumfries House clip to support the artisans to start working with the King's clip. And then since the website's been launched, we've had over 200 brands and businesses engaging with us and on our map, and we've got traction in 44 different countries. We've got a beautiful series of animations that I'm doing the voiceover on every single animation. So if you want to hear my voice for any longer, then go on and see the wool story. And it talks about from 4000 BC all the way through to the present day, and kind of the slow decline in the interest in British wool and the cost of British wool and the impacts of COVID, and how we're hoping to try and regenerate it through the work that we're doing. So it's very much a kind of like systems thinking website, and it's an education tool, and it's trying to kind of bridge the gap and make it more simplified for everybody, really, from students all the way through to industry. And then the map, we're just updating it now because we've got more people on the map, but you can see that it kind of goes through every process, really, from farming, grading, scouring, combing and carding, and then spinning, dyeing, weaving and knitting, and then sort of repair studios as well. And then that's just the picture of the Modern Artisan. So that was one of the oversized scarves that was made from the King's clip, which was incredible to see. Shame we haven't got it with us today, but that's a beautiful picture of it that Ukes Net-a-Porter, because they funded the research project, used for the kind of press release and launch. And then, so up to the lead of this, we had 2 round tables, which was great to really engage everyone from policymakers all the way through to industry, because Fashion Roundtable is a think tank and change agency. So we also work kind of within the policy space as well, which is really interesting, especially to see how British wool kind of slots into that in terms of things like digital product passports, product environmental footprint category rules, a lot of the stuff that was mentioned yesterday, which is really, really interesting to see how it slots in so beautifully. And then it's just an image of some of the recent events that we've been to. So we're at Future Fabrics Expo, Groundswell, London Design Festival, Interwoven Wool Across Borders. I've lectured at London College of Fashion, Bath Spa University, and then we're going to be having the Dumfries House Great British Wool Revival Summit on the 19th of May next year, which is really exciting to talk about where we're at with the project and to speak about the future of British wool, really from the education system all the way through to brands, businesses and industry. And that's it. So yeah, open to questions. Thank you.
Hello. Oh, yeah. Amazing work, Harriet. Obviously, I've known you for some time now, and I know this incredible work that you do, both as a practitioner and with Fashion Roundtable. In terms of the educational part of the project, which is incredible, and I think is such a good, useful tool for our students, how do students get to find out about this or use? Is it a resource that students can use, or...?
Yeah, so on the Great British Wool Revival, there's a resources page where there's kind of workbooks that they can download and little things that they can do to kind of map their own mini supply chains, almost in a similar way that I did. And then they can use the website to kind of find farms around them that are close to them, start working with their wool. They can speak to us about how they would go about it. So we've tried to kind of make it as simplified as possible with a step-by-step guide.
Amazing. Thank you. That's great. We'll have to share it with our students. Brilliant. Anybody got any thinking about questions? Maybe not. Anybody interested in asking any questions while we've got Harriet here? No. Yes.
Maybe I'll ask a question. So obviously I was aware of the Great British Wool Revival and of your website, and I've been had a look, and I'm wondering, like, in terms of the mapping, you're connecting all of those different things together. So on there's all of the different processes, right? Because that's part of the wool as well. Like I suppose there's so much to know, and the more you know, the more there is to know in terms of how you want to use British wool and some of the barriers to actually getting it from basically from fleece to an end garment. Sort of lost my question really, but I suppose is the process is a resource for everybody to use, right? So it's for students also, from people like myself that are manufacturing or making some British knitwear.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So when I worked with the Wool Library, at the time I was still a student, so I was doing my master's. So I was coming from a student's perspective. So I've inputted in terms of problems that I see that students could face. And then the Wool Library is very much problems that industry can face. So we were hoping that could try and support everybody across the whole kind of value chain. Just to make it more understandable and more simplified, because I think if you've got a map of a supply chain and you've got a breakdown of how it works, a breakdown of terminology, resources, and address book, it's just going to help it to be more digestible, I think, instead of getting too overwhelmed and thinking, I'm too scared, I don't know where to start, and just running away, kind of helping to make it more tangible.
So is there a plan of where you take this next, or what the next step of this is?
Exactly, yes. So it would be the summit up at Dumfries House in May. So I'm speaking to the King's Foundation at the moment. I was up there a couple of weeks ago. But it'll be the summit, and then we're hoping to do another Wool Roundtable after that, and then think about how we can grow the project and hopefully have more universities engaged and on board, because I truly believe the secret is education. We need to get this into as many schools and universities as possible, because if we're not teaching designers on the ground before they go into industry how to work with British wool, then you can't expect people in industry to all of a sudden transition. It's very hard. So if we can get that kind of base level teaching, then I think then we can build better systems change moving out.
It's not really a question, but I just wanted to say this is such an amazing tool to have as someone who's just sort of starting out, working with wool, and wanting to basically go into knitwear and work with British wool. This is so amazing. So thank you.
No, thank you. It was kind of a dream of my master's as well. I mean, it was great that it was already happening, but when I was doing my master's, I wanted to do so much more than just the creative part at that point. I was like, okay, this is a systems problem, like how can we fill those and plug those gaps? So it was great that I was brought onto this project and was able to kind of run with it when I was also still studying at the same time.